Hi, this is Goichi. Welcome to the Doorway to the World. Well, today is episode 2 of Life of David in Exile. Well, in the last session we talked about his young life, the youth, young time of David. Well, today we're going to talk about time when he was in exile. Well, as you remember, that David became shepherd's boy, became a soldier, and became famous and popular, and the King Saul became jealous and fearful of David and trying to kill him. So David ran away, ran for his life from King's palace. Well, he's about around the early 20s, mid 20s. Now he's on the run, helped by good friend Jonathan. Okay, David, that giant killer, the successful military commander, famous in Israel and surrounding area. Please remember that he was well known. Yeah, and there are the many supporters of David were there too. You remember the soldiers and officers, they liked him. Well, and the people liked him, Well, anyway, he was on the run. And first place he went to place in the land of Judah, a place called Nob, and there he needed food, he needed a weapon, he needed supply, because he just ran in the middle of the night. He didn't have anything, you see. So he was after all those things, the food and the weapon, and met this guy called Ahimelech. He was a priest, and he was very sympathiful. He sympathized David, very helpful, and helped David, gave him a bread and gave him a sword. Used to belong to Goliath, funny enough. Do you remember I said David was famous and there are many supporters there? Ahimelech is one of them. He was a David sympathizer. So Ahimelech helped him, and David went on with the food, supply, and weapon with him. Okay. But unbeknown to David didn't know this. But what happened later, the Ahimelech's favor was found out by a guy called Doeg, the Edomite, who was in King Saul's court. And he told Saul about this. And Saul was angry, Goodness, when this guy, the priest, helped David, kill him, Doeg. So Doeg went down there, killed Ahimelech, along with 85 priests. Only Ahimelech's son, called Abiathar, survived and escaped, and later he joined David. But David didn't know that, so he went on his way, and he went to the land of Philistine, place called Gath. And at that time there was a king Achish, was in Philistine. The king was called Achish in Philistine, and David went there anonymously, Probably he had a disguise and everything. He didn't wish for people to find out. Remember, he killed their champion Goliath. That defeat of that Israel-Philistine war, the cause of it is David. So David wasn't popular in Philistine. So David, probably in disguise, and so hopefully I will find out. Just stay there for a little while, and then maybe go somewhere else. But David was recognized by Philistine. Probably people said, that guy looks familiar. That's David, the Goliath killer. He killed our champion. They killed our soldier. So David was so afraid. Do you remember? He was alone in the land, and everybody's enemy. And so what he did, he feigned madness, pretending he's mad. His saliva goes around. I think he peed himself as well. I can't remember if he said. But anyway, he feigned mad. Oh, sounds like a little bit like a Macbeth. No, Hamlet, sorry. A bit like a Hamlet. But he feigned madness to protect himself, and he worked. Everybody said, oh, that might not be David. Or even if it was David, he's no use. And so he managed to escape the town of Gath and decided to go back to Judah, land of Judah again. But not in the cities and towns. He went into the wilderness, place called Adullam, and there are many caves there that he could hide. You see. So, left the gas, David was hiding in a cave of Adullam, in the wilderness of Judah, for a little while, in safety. And at that time, David's situation, I believe, it was known to the people in Israel. Oh, that David, the commander of 1,000, the Goliath, Goliath killer, our champion, that mighty David. Did you hear? The king was trying to kill him, and he ran away. So I think that kind of things, probably people knew, became well-known news. I know they didn't have any like a newspaper, well, they didn't have a tele or internet or Twitter or anything like that, but those things just spread. So what happened was, in that kind of situation, David's family wasn't in a good situation. It's almost a dangerous situation. Like he was a family of the traitor, according to the king. So family, the David's parents and brothers, yeah, they left Bethlehem and joined David in Adram. You see, well, David had a bit of wisdom, because parents getting old, and then David's fate wasn't quite sure. He wasn't quite sure. He's in danger. He wasn't quite sure that it was a good idea for the parents to be there. So they went to land of Moab, the country next to Israel, and asked the king of Moab if his parents could stay for a little while in peace as a refuge while David was going to sort out his life, you see. And then king said, yeah, all right then. So David's parents, Jesse, they was left in a Moab in a safety, and David came back to Adullam, the caves of Adullam. And at that time, interesting things happened. The many people in Israel who are in distress, the Bible says, who are in distress, in debt and discontent. And I put the bracket with the King Saul's government, close the bracket, joined David. See, those people who are in debt, who are in distress and discontent, joined David, and it was about 400 people, 400 men. So it was his family, could be more people there, joined David. Those people. Saul wasn't perfect king, wasn't the excellent king. Maybe charismatic, probably he wasn't that good king to the people, or any society. There are people who are not pleased or content with the authority figure anyway. And those people joined. Probably some of them are criminals, I don't know. But those people who are in debt, distress, and discontent, they went to join David. Because do you remember, David was popular and famous, so they had he had a bit of a supporter beforehand anyway. And some people really liked him and probably find out where he was and then joined them. Natural, isn't it? And also, he's a renegade. Attracts more renegades. Those people. Sounds familiar? If you want to know more about, watch the film Young Guns. Billy the Kid. How all those renegades gathered together. So this is a bit like that. David, the Young Guns, got together. All those guys, maybe some of them were wayward, some of the criminals, some of the outside the law, with a good reason maybe, but they joined. So later, some of those men became known as mighty men of David. They are loyal to David, see? And they bonded together. Among them was Joab, a guy called Joab, who's actually David's nephew, and happened to be around similar age as David, actually, this Joab. Joab was a nephew, even though he was older sister of David's, the son of older sister of David's. So David's older sister had a son called Joab, and Joab's brothers, and they became one of the main commander of David's army later. But those guys and the mighty man, you can read about this mighty man in Kings and Chronicles. There are lists of them, and fascinating. Such a characters. They are so interesting, brilliant. If you like those hero stories, you read the Judges and read about the mighty man of David. Not only David, mighty man of David. They are good. They even got the son of Dodo. Do you remember Dodo? Well, anyway, I like him because of the name. But anyway, so 400 men join them. Now, those bunch of guys, the motley crew, the renegades, the young guns, they are running away from the authority of King Saul. Well, from cave of Adullam, they couldn't stay there forever. Even the prophet guy joined, Gath, and those guys, priests and prophets joined, and God told David through them that don't stay there, let's go somewhere else. So they moved on. David moved on with his man, and he went to, as they're moving, they find out there's a town called Keilah on the border of facing the Philistine that was raided by the Philistine. And then David thought, well, our countrymen's attacked by Philistines, let's go and help them. So those 400 men, the strong warriors they are, yeah, and David, the mighty commander, the giant killer, they went there, rescued Keilah. People thanked them, but God told David, don't stay in the town Keilah, because those people is going to betray you and sell you to Saul. So David, and at that time, 400 men became 600 men. It grew and grew, see? And they headed south, east, to this wilderness called Ziph, west of Hebron, that is, in Israel. So, because God told them to go over there, so they went. Well, meanwhile, back in the palace, King Saul, he was very anxious of David's whereabouts. You see, the threat is out there, and people seems like joining him. He was anxious, want to find out, even catch him. See, David wanted, dead or alive. Well, anyway, roundabout, he was in Keilah and mobilized his army to pursue him. You see, the people of Keilah told him that's where they are. And on the way to Keilah, Saul found out David escaped and headed to Ziph. So he continued the pursuit of David into the wilderness. Okay. While Saul and his army is pursuing David, Jonathan secretly went to see David and warned him about it, and encouraged him. They're still good friends. And then at that time, Jonathan tried to stop his father, but father didn't listen. So that's why Jonathan went around by himself, met David, and encouraged him, my dad's still pursuing, I'm with you, etc. Sadly, this was the last time they met face to face. And they never met. They never meet again. They never met again. After this, that was the last time, but they didn't know that. Well, anyway, people of Ziph, yeah, they saw the army of, they saw the King Saul came with his army. I think they are afraid, if they stand up for David, probably whole town will be annihilated, because King Saul was like that. So they betrayed and sold David to Saul. So Saul was closing into David now, know the whereabouts, and almost captured him. When the message they came to tell Saul that the Philistines are invading, going over the Israel's border. See, Philistines attacking. So King got the message. Saul got the message, and he broke off the pursuit of David to face the Philistines. See? So this point, it was so close for David. I thought, oh, I'm gonna die, but God is with him, isn't he? So Saul went back to face the Philistine, and then with this, David fled Ziph and going to a place called En-Gedi, which is by the Dead Sea. So what happened was, he went to the Gath in the Philistine, well, not to the Gath to back into the cave of Adram, and from cave of Adram went to Kira, but from Kira went to Ziph, and from Ziph went eastward to the place called En-Gedi, by the lake of Dead Sea. So that's the situation, and Saul is fighting against the Philistines, by the way. Okay. Now, what happened is, Saul finished the fighting against the Philistines, fended them off, and returned back on the pursuit to resume the search for David with 3,000 men army. At the En-Gedi, the Saul took rest in the cave. Saul found out David went that way, so they're pursuing. He's pursuing, and then got a little tired, so had a rest in the cave in En-Gedi. And what happened? That cave happened to be where David and his man was hiding. The big cave, big cave, and right at the bottom of the cave, they were hiding. And then they saw, someone's coming, keep it quiet, someone's coming. That's a King Saul. King Saul didn't know anything. I'm just gonna have a bit of a rest there. Anyway, David's man said, this is the chance, David. Let's kill him. Let's get rid of the future threat so that we don't have to run anymore. So man wanted to kill this King Saul. But David said, nope, I'm not gonna kill the king. I'm gonna spare his life, because King Saul, interesting, David said, King Saul, this is the king God chose for the Israel. I'm not gonna lay my hand against God's anointed. I'm not gonna be responsible for the blood on my hand to kill the God's anointed. This is interesting. This is something we can learn. This attitude of David to the authority. Often that we face in our lives, that the people we don't like, or people treat us really badly. And those people are somehow in a position of authority. And often those people are in this position put by God. We know that. That could be a church leaders or something that you look up, it's positioning above you. I mean, even people in the government, God said those people in authority, God has put them. You see, you never know the God's purpose for that person to be, why that person to be put in a position, because God has a purpose there, and God put those people into the places. But quite often when we are treated badly, that we want to get rid of that person, we want to lay our hands against them. But David had every reason and excuse to kill King Saul there, because he was trying to kill him. So he could say it was self-defense. I was trying to save my life, my future, my family, my man. But David said, no, I'm not going to lay a hand against God's anointed. I'm going to stand on a righteous ground, at least myself, so that I am counted as righteous. If I kill him and stop God's will to be done, then, God hasn't told me to kill King Saul, David said, but if I kill the one that God hasn't told me to kill, then I'm stopping God's will. Have you ever thought about that, about the person that you want to kill? Well, you want to kill, you want to lay the hand against. This is something that we can learn. Bigger picture, knowing the heart of God, isn't it? So David was like that. Said, I'm not gonna harm him. So David did not kill King Saul, but he cut off the edge of his robe without Saul knowing it, and they went back in hiding. And later, David went to Saul's camp and said, look, I could have killed him then, but I didn't. This is the evidence, please no, I have no intention of harming you, king. So please stop pursuing me. With that, Saul said, all right, you don't have intention to harm me. I'm going back. So Saul went back home. Well, that's the first time. After that, I think David didn't totally trust king's repentance of that time. You know, not harming the king, not having an intention to harm king, the God's anointed, and trusting him is a different matter. You know, David had wisdom. So David and the man went on. And they came to the place called Carmel, where they met a man called Nabal and his wife Abigail. And Nabal was a wealthy man. He had a flock and they employed shepherds. They employed by Nabal, and they were looking after the sheep and the property, etc. And at that time, David, the 600 men, possibly with their families, so it's quite big, you know, more than 1,000 people, I would imagine, you know, or close to 1,000 people. They need supply, don't they? They need a food, they need a supply, they need a place. So, met this wealthy man. The first thing is, he might be able to help us, you know, but we're not gonna just ask him for the supply for free. Let's work for him a bit, because places around this, maybe the lions and bears and bandits and all those things that might be threatening, harmful to all those his flocks and shepherds. What can we do? Well, we got the weapons, we got the man. Let's offering them the protection. So that's what the David and man did. So went to Nabal. We offer our service to protect your sheep for a while, sheep and flocks, shepherds and all that property from all those harms. So in return, would you give us spares with some supplies, you see? You know, I thought that was an honest deal. At least David and man thought. But Nabal refused and even insulted David. Well, David and his man are very angry, isn't it? They went to, proper, righteous, good deal. And then it was refused, not only refused, but insulted by him. Yeah, probably Nabal swore, but never mind. Anyway, so they decided to kill him, the whole family and everything. But just before they went about to kill him, then Nabal's wife, Abigail, came and interceded for the family, see? And brought some supplies to David and his men and said, please do not harm Nabal's life and us. I think she is a really good woman, because David fell in love with her and they later eventually married her. So, well, anyway, so David and man decided not to harm Nabal, accepted the gift. And next day, and the day went on, the next day, Abigail told Nabal about what happened. But Nabal got really angry with his wife, Abigail. I don't know, did she saved his life, but he got angry. Proud man, probably. I don't know. And because he was so angry, he had a heart attack and dropped dead on the spot. Now, suddenly Abigail, the widow, no husband. Well, David, good-looking guy, young, nice-looking, wise woman. They fell in love and they got married. So Abigail became David's wife. Well, you never know what happens in life, isn't it? David. And also, interesting, David also married another girl called, another woman, Ahinoam of Jezreel. Its only name is mentioned. And some other women, some other wives that David had later. And that was quite common of that time in the customs, to have several wives. So that's why it was that. And, talking about wives, David's wives, do you remember he had a wife left in Jerusalem? Her name is Michal, the daughter of King Saul. Michal really loved David and helped him escape as well. The Bible tells us. And but he was left in a palace. Meanwhile, something happened to her. She was still married to David, but estranged, kind of, left in Jerusalem. And her father, King Saul, gave her to the man called part2 in Galilee. It's interesting, isn't it? Like, as I said, Michal probably still loved David, but it was out of her control because it's a king's order. And probably Saul's intention might be trying to cut off any ties he had and daughter had or family had with David, officially and publicly. So, the Bible doesn't tell us the intention of King Saul, why he did that. And then probably there might be some explanation studies, you can find it on the internet and books and stuff. So that might be interesting, some kind of revelation might come. But Michal was given to some other man. David didn't know that. Later he finds out. But so, something about his wives. So, David married, and seems like things going pretty well. Seems like King Saul stopped pursuing him. He got the wife, got family. Well, it wasn't quite so. David's suspicion came quite true, Saul wouldn't give up. What happened is that David and his man went on a place called Hakila, and that's what, again, encountered Saul's camp. Reason is that Zephonite, people Zeph once betrayed David and sold David to David's position to sold David's position to King Saul. Earlier, they did it again. They betrayed him for a second time. So Saul found out where David is and went back to pursue him again, tried to kill him again. And David, in hiding, found out where Saul and his army was camping. And in the night, David said, I think I'm going to go down and have a look. Anybody come with me? And then one guy called Abishai said, yeah, David, I'll go with you. I will go with you. And Abishai was actually the younger brother of Joab. Do you remember Joab, David's nephew, later the great general with David's army? Yeah, Abishai is a great warrior as well. He's a mighty warrior. He's one of the mighty men of David. And so David and Abishai, they went down secretly on covert mission to Saul's camp in the middle of the night, sneaking, like Metal Gear Solid. They go like that. Snake Plissken. Well, those people who know the game, you know what I mean. So went down there and went to Saul's tent. Now, again, David, looking at the Saul sleeping, probably Abishai wanted to kill Saul, but Abishai knew that David's heart. So David didn't kill him, but just grabbed Saul's spear and the water jug by his bed and quietly sneaked that back to their hidings. Next day, David went back into Saul's camp and said, hey, stop, don't harm me. Look, I got your spear, I got your jugs. I sneaked in last night into your bedroom. I could have killed him, but I didn't. That's evidence. Please know, I have no intention of harming you. I don't want to kill you. So please understand and please do not pursue me anymore. Saul repented and said to David, I'm not going to pursue you anymore. I can understand your heart. Maybe he did. Or possibly at that time, Philistine threat to the Israel became much greater. Because we can tell that from the stories that the next chapters in the Bible that the Philistines started invading, they went to war again with Israel. So, Saul might have to go back. Probably, he realized he didn't have time to pursue the personal vendetta, against David. So, nevertheless, Saul said, okay, I'm not going to pursue you anymore, David. You're free to go. So Saul went back to Jerusalem, stopped pursuing. Funny enough, interestingly enough, David did not trust him. Bible says that David did not trust him, so that he and his man fled to Gath in the Philistine again for the second time, and settled in Ziklag this time. Well, we could see that from the Bible because we can read. And Saul actually did not pursue David ever again because he died. If he didn't die, I don't know. He might have pursued again, but nevertheless, this is the time, last time Saul pursued him and he stopped pursuing him. Now, David is in the land of Philistine, Gath and Ziklag. Interesting. While he is the David, the future king to be, is in Philistine, that the one made him king died. That's Samuel, the great judge and prophet, the last judge, I would call last judge. Samuel died in Ramah, where he was born. So that really ended time of judges. Well, Samuel, what a life he had, eh? Well, anyway, so Saul's back in Jerusalem. Maybe he was preparing for the war against Philistine. You never know, but But meanwhile, David is in a Philistine. David and his 600 men, who is his family, went to Gaza and actually met King Achish. Do you remember King Achish the first time? Well, went back there, asked them if they could stay there. And around that time, King Achish and Philistines kind of know what's happening. They are running away from Saul. Your enemy is my enemy type things. So okay, you are running away from Saul. You're against Saul. So already, let you stay. Funny enough, David and his man were given the town of Ziklag to settle in. Quite large number of people were given one region, one town to settle in, which is interesting. Remember, David and his man are Israelite, and this King Achish is the king of Philistine. Yeah, but anyway, so had a favor from the king. Okay, and David and this King Achish, very interestingly, they were on a good term. They're very friendly. Even that the Bible tells us King Achish trusted David. You can see that in 1 Samuel 10-7, But other officials and soldiers and military commanders, and not quite so. You see, their personal friendship went on with David and Achish, but all other guys, especially military leaders, didn't trust David. I can understand that, because they killed Goliath. He killed Goliath, Probably Goliath was one of the military's pride, a trusted soldier, what is champion, and they killed. So I can understand that. But anyway, David and man stayed in Ziklag for about a year and a half. And after the year and a half, Philistine finally went war against Israel. And Achish wanted to take David and his men to this war against Israel as his personal bodyguard. But he met a strong opposition from his own commanders, the military commanders and officials. He said, well, David and those men, they're Israelites. If you're going to war against the Israelites, they might turn against us. And if you keep them close to you, they might kill you. It's no wise king. It's no wise king. Please don't do that. And of course, with that opposition, Akisha had to say, okay, I understand. So he told David and his men, no, I cannot take you with us on this war, because of the official said it's quite right. It doesn't mean I don't trust you, but I'm a king. I have to think about my soldiers, my military leaders, and my officials, and all those guys. And so I can take you with me on this war. So go back to Ziklag. David understand, and then they went back to Ziklag. Okay. What happened? Something happened. Horrible happened when they went back to Ziklag, where they settled, where they left the family. They find out Amalekites raided the town of Ziklag, took everything that David and his men had, including their families, and they burnt down everything, destroyed everything. Oh my goodness. They're so devastated, distressed, angry. There's horrible. Families gone and everything. Someone stole all that. And David's man was so angry, but they couldn't find anybody or anywhere to vent their angers at that moment, except on their leader, David. Oh, it's David, it's your fault. You brought us into the land of Philistine, blah, blah, blah. Those guys are great mighty man, fighting man, the man with hot blood, they're the man of man, because mighty man. They get angry quite quickly, and they just distress and frustration, anger, they needed to vent out somewhere, and the only thing they could find was a David, you see, and they even trying to kill him, or thinking about killing him. And imagine that David, after all those years, after all these trials, spent time together, and they turned against me. Why? I can't imagine how distressed he was. But something interesting, something great happened. Bible tells us in that David found strength in the Lord. Bible doesn't tell us exactly what he did. Particular actions, motions, anything. He didn't even say he prayed or anything. Only said David found strength in the Lord. I'd like to find out what he did to find the strength in the Lord. Maybe everybody's got a different way to find the strength in the Lord in the most horrible time. But one thing I know, we can find the strength in the Lord. God always has strength for us. If we look, that's what David did. And not only that, when he found strength in the Lord, they managed to persuade all other men. And I think that strength that David found in the Lord infected all the men. Because man decided to go against go pursuing Amalekites, and they did and recovered everything, including their family. You see, again, this incident, many preaching, many teaching there. So please find out, study it, read it, study it, take it to the heart. We can always find strength in the Lord. That's a great thing that we have. And that will infect into other people. Good thing God given us. All right. So he recovered. Nevertheless, David and his men still staying in Philistine, while Philistine is having a war against Israel. Okay. Meanwhile, the Saul facing the Philistines, you see, in this war, but he was very much less confident, unsure and unstable, partly because the great mentor or someone he trusted, the great prophet, the judge, that Samuel is no more. If anything before, he could went to see him and inquire, but Samuel's not there. So what did he do? He solicited with witch or medium of Edo, and he called up. He ordered this witch of Edo to call up Samuel's spirit, so that he can talk to him, have a bit of assurance. And Samuel's spirit came up and said, "What are you doing, Saul? Doing things with a witch of Endor? Call me up from a nice happy place. Well, because if you did this, it's so displeasing to God. This against what God tells you. I gotta prophesy this. You and your son's gonna die tomorrow." And that's it. Oh my goodness, the things people do in a desperation. There's a great contrast, isn't it? Desperation in David, he sought after the Lord. He found strength in the Lord. Saul, in desperation, he went to witches. Didn't even ask God. You see, something we can learn. In a bad situation, what would you do? You're going to ask God, or you're going to find the worldly way, the way that the world gives you. Well, choice is yours, but you can see what happened. One recovered everything and more, and one died. Unbelievable. Well, next day, just as Samuel prophesied, the Saul's 3 sons died, including Jonathan. In the battle. And Saul killed himself. That's end of Saul. You see, only one son of Saul survived, and his name is Ishbosheth. And Jonathan's son, the Mephibosheth, was survived, but he was crippled. Very sad ending, isn't it? The Saul became a first king of Israel, became very charismatic, very well known. It could have become a great king, we never know. But because his character and lack of faith in God, they brought all tragedy and end to his dynasty. Well, nevertheless, when David heard about this news, those messengers came, said, David, your nemesis, your menace, that the arch enemy, the King Saul's dead, and his sons, nobody's gonna bother you anymore. Those messengers thought they'll be rewarded, But David didn't. David wasn't that pleased of the message, and he actually very, very mourned for Saul and Jonathan. His mourning for them was very sincere, and then we can see that in his lamentation, 2 Samuel, chapter 1, verse 17 to 27. David lamented, made a song, and he was really sad that God's anointed was died like that, and his best friends killed. From that, we can see that for David, the Saul was still his king, despite of that Saul was trying to kill him and didn't like him. But for David, he was the king. David never intended to harm the king, and never did. All he did was trying to avoid a conflict with him, trying to run away so that he would not get killed. Maybe he was seeing something different. Do you remember that all David's men suggested to kill Saul when he had opportunity, but David didn't? As I said, maybe David saw something that the other people didn't see in Saul. God's purpose. even David didn't fully understood that God's purpose was Saul. But David trusted God that he chose Saul as a king for his purpose. We can learn from David's attitude towards unfriendly authority, as I said earlier. You see, this whole exile time, David, was his growing time. He growing in his character. He grew in his character. He grew in the faith in God. He grew the friendship with Jonathan. He grew the friendship, the bond together with his man. But also, I think he grew to trust the God's purpose in people's lives at this point. I think that's something that we need to grasp hold. Whoever comes in our lives, they might not have a bad intention on our lives, but if you believe God put that person there, he must have a purpose for the person, for his purpose. God must have a purpose for the person to be there. And we need to trust God in that. And that's where the prayer comes in. The revelation comes in. Ask God, what is the purpose for this man in my life? Or this woman, this person in my life? And let's keep standing on the righteous ground. Said, I'm not gonna lay my hand against God's anointed. But God, I trust you, protect me, lead me, and help me understand your purpose for this particular situation with this particular man over our lives. Well, so that's the episode 2, the exile of David's life. Well, this exile is coming to the end now because the Saul died. The destiny now is pushing David into the next chapter. He becomes king of Israel. See you on episode 3. Goodbye.